She fined me $500 a day for standing on my own land. The deputies rolled up before I even finished my coffee. I was standing beside a reservoir I legally bought 3 weeks earlier when the HOA president pointed at me like I was trespassing on my own land. She handed me a bright orange violation notice in front of 2 deputies and half the neighborhood. But nobody there knew the lake had never legally belonged to the HOA in the first place. And what started as a simple property dispute turned into federal inspectors, courtroom silence, and a marina chain-locked by the government itself. If you enjoy stories about land rights, quiet resilience, and ordinary people standing their ground the lawful way, hit subscribe and stay with me. This one only gets crazier the deeper the paperwork goes. The deputies pulled up before I finished my coffee. I was standing near the shoreline of Blackwater Reservoir with the paper cup warming my hand, staring across 4 acres of still Colorado water that legally belonged to me as of 23 days earlier. Pine shadows stretched across the surface. The marina dock sat about 100 yards out, quiet except for a loose strand of orange string lights moving in the wind. Then tires crunched over gravel behind me. 2 sheriff SUVs rolled down the narrow access road between the cedar fence posts and stopped hard enough to throw dust across the hood of my truck. I turned slowly. Deputy Cole Ramirez stepped out first. Young guy, early 30s maybe. Calm face, cautious posture. His partner climbed out on the passenger side, older and heavier, one hand already resting near his belt. But neither of them moved first. Vanessa Holloway did. She stepped out from behind the second cruiser, wearing a cream-colored coat and sunglasses too expensive for 8 in the morning. She pointed directly at me before the deputies even reached the shoreline. "That's him," she snapped. "That's the man I told dispatch about." Her voice carried clean across the water. A few people standing near the marina turned to watch. Someone on the dock stopped untying a fishing boat. Another resident lifted a phone halfway, like they were deciding whether this was worth recording. Vanessa marched toward me over the gravel path like she already owned the outcome. "This reservoir belongs to Millstone Ridge Estates," she said. "He's trespassing on community property and harassing residents." I looked at the deputies instead of her. Deputy Ramirez stopped a few feet away. "Sir," he said carefully, "mind explaining what you're doing out here this morning?" I glanced at the lake. My lake, then back at him. "Drinking coffee," I said. Vanessa let out a sharp laugh. "Cute. He's been warned already." She pulled a bright orange notice from a leather folder and shoved it toward me without waiting for permission. The paper fluttered at once in the wind before I took it. "Official HOA violation notice. Trespass on community amenity." I read the first few lines while she kept talking. "We've operated this marina for over 20 years, she said loudly enough for the residents at the dock to hear. "This water is maintained by the association. Our residents pay for it. He has absolutely no legal right to be here." The older deputy shifted uncomfortably. Deputy Ramirez looked at the notice, then at me. "Sir, do you have any documentation regarding ownership?" I folded the orange paper once and rested it carefully on the hood of my truck. Then I reached inside my jacket. Vanessa crossed her arms immediately, confident now. Certain, I pulled out the folded county deed. The paper still carried the faint crease from the recorder's office. I handed it to Ramirez. He opened it slowly. The morning got quiet. Even the people near the marina stopped moving. Ramirez read the first page once, then again, slower. I watched the exact moment his expression changed. Not dramatic, just enough. His eyes moved toward the parcel number, then toward the legal description, then toward the words Blackwater Reservoir Parcel. Vanessa noticed the shift immediately. "Well?" she demanded. Ramirez didn't answer her. Instead, he looked at me. "You purchased this property through county auction?" "Recorded 3 weeks ago," I said. "Mesa County Clerk's Office." The older deputy finally stepped closer to look over Ramirez's shoulder. Vanessa laughed again, but it sounded thinner now. Whatever paperwork he has doesn't change the fact that this reservoir has belonged to this community for 23 years. 23 years. She said it like duration was ownership, like repetition became law if you enforced it long enough. I took another sip of coffee. It had already gone lukewarm.
Monsieur
Holloway, Ramirez said carefully. We may need clarification regarding the property boundaries here. Her face tightened instantly. There is no clarification needed, she snapped. The HOA maintains the marina, the docks, the shoreline. The shoreline isn't the water, I said quietly. That stopped her. Just for a second. The older deputy finally handed the deed back to me. Neither deputy looked eager to continue the confrontation now. Ramirez cleared his throat. Sir, at this point, this appears to be a civil property dispute. Vanessa stared at him. Excuse me? We're not removing anyone today, he said. The silence after that felt heavier than the mountain air. Out on the marina dock, someone lowered their phone. Vanessa's jaw flexed once. You need to contact the HOA attorney immediately, she said to the deputies. This man is trying to steal association property through some kind of technical loophole. I folded the deed carefully and slid it back into my jacket. No, I said. I bought abandoned property through a public tax auction after your association ignored a certified letter explaining exactly who I was. That hit harder than I expected. Vanessa blinked once. A tiny reaction, but enough. You sent us nothing, she said immediately. I have the return receipt. Deputy Ramirez looked between us again, suddenly realizing this argument had started long before the 911 call. Vanessa stepped backward toward the SUVs. This isn't over, she said coldly. The board will handle this properly. Then she turned and walked back toward the road without waiting for another response. The deputies followed a moment later. Before climbing into his cruiser, Ramirez paused beside me. You might want to keep copies of everything with you, he said quietly. I do. He nodded once and shut the door. The SUVs rolled back up the gravel road, dust drifting behind them through the pine trees until the sound disappeared completely. Then it was quiet again, just water, wind, and the marina sitting out there under its members. Only sign like nothing had changed. But something had, because for the first time in 23 years, somebody had finally forced the question nobody in Millstone Ridge had ever bothered asking. Who actually owned the lake? And somewhere behind those expensive sunglasses and HOA notices, Vanessa Holloway had just realized she might not know the answer. I stood at the shoreline for another minute after the deputies left, watching the dust settle back onto the gravel road. Across the water, two residents near the marina kept staring in my direction like they were trying to decide whether I was dangerous or just inconvenient. Neither mattered much. Paper mattered. I got back into my truck, drove 10 miles into Ashton Creek, and parked outside the Mesa County Records office just before noon. The building smelled like old carpet, printer toner, and dry paper. County offices always do. Half the lights buzzed overhead. Nobody moved fast inside, except attorneys and people behind on taxes. 3 weeks earlier, this place had handed me Blackwater Reservoir. Not intentionally, just carelessly. I'd been sitting at one of the public computer terminals, running parcel searches when the listing first appeared. Most people searching county tax auctions look for cabins, lots, mineral rights. I look for mistakes, forgotten parcels, land trapped between legal descriptions. Property nobody bothered to finish claiming when developers carved ranch land into subdivisions back in the 70s and 80s. Blackwater showed up as parcel 14B, 4 acres. Water feature unimproved, no active owner of record. That wording stopped me immediately. Water features don't usually float ownerless through county records for 30 years unless somebody made a paperwork mistake. Expensive enough, nobody wanted to untangle it. I pulled the original plat maps the same afternoon. That was where things got interesting. Millstone Ridge Estates had been developed in 1987 by a company called Hollow Creek Development Group. 96 residential lots, front entrance common area, utility easements, marina access path, and one separate parcel, the reservoir, drawn cleanly outside HOA boundaries with its own legal designation. I remember tracing the boundary line twice with my finger just to make sure I wasn't misreading it. The HOA stopped at the shoreline. The water itself belonged to nobody, or at least nobody yet. An older clerk named Sandra had walked past my desk while I was studying the plats. "You look like you found something," she'd said. "Maybe," I answered. She leaned over enough to glance at the parcel number. Then she laughed quietly. "That thing again." I looked up. "You know about it?" "Only because every few years somebody notices it and starts asking questions." She shrugged. "Most people assume the HOA owns it. They don't? If they did, there'd be a deed transfer. There wasn't. I checked. Twice. No conveyance record. No easement grant. No transfer instrument from the original developer to Millstone Ridge Estates HOA. Nothing filed with the county clerk tying the reservoir legally to the subdivision. Just assumptions. 23 years built on assumptions. I hired a title attorney before bidding. Then a water rights specialist out of Grand Junction. Both came back with the same conclusion. The parcel was clean, legally auctionable, and potentially far more valuable than the county realized. That second part came from the creek. Blackwater Reservoir fed directly into Alder Creek through a spillway on the western side. Alder Creek crossed county lines before feeding into a larger tributary system regulated under federal jurisdiction. The water rights attorney explained it over speakerphone while I sat in my truck outside a gas station. "You need to contact the Army Corps before you do anything with structures on that water," she'd told me. "Why?" "Because if the creek connection qualifies under federal navigation standards, jurisdiction changes completely." I wrote down the statute reference on the back of a receipt. At the time, I thought it was just precautionary. I didn't realize it was eventually going to drop a federal lock onto Vanessa Holloway's Marina gate. After the auction closed, I did what reasonable people do when they buy land adjacent to a residential community. I tried to talk first. Certified mail. Return receipt requested. I introduced myself as the new owner of Blackwater Reservoir, explained that I understood the HOA had historically used the water recreationally, requested a meeting to discuss a formal easement agreement that would allow residents to continue marina access legally. Simple, professional, no threats, no demands. The green receipt card came back signed 4 days later. Vanessa Holloway herself had signed it. Then nothing. No call, no email, no attorney response. 3 weeks of silence, followed by a 911 call and an orange trespassing notice. That told me everything I needed to know about how Millstone Ridge handled problems. Not with verification, not with records, with intimidation. I pulled into my driveway just before sunset. My cabin sat at the edge of scrub pine and old ranch fencing about 15 minutes west of the reservoir. Quiet place. Enough distance from town that you could hear coyotes at night if the wind carried right. There was a certified envelope sitting in my mailbox. HOA Property Management Services. I opened it standing beside the truck. Inside was a formal cease and desist notice and a fine assessment. $500 per day. Retroactive to my first documented visit to the shoreline. I read the number twice. $3,500. For standing beside property I legally owned. I looked back toward the direction of Blackwater Reservoir, invisible beyond the hills now. Then I looked again at the signature line near the bottom of the letter. Vanessa Holloway. The woman had ignored a deed, ignored county records, ignored certified mail, and now she was trying to fine the legal owner of the reservoir for trespassing on his own land. Which meant one thing. Vanessa wasn't bluffing anymore. She actually believed the lake belonged to her. That made her dangerous. I spent the next morning at Lena Brooks' office in Grand Junction. Lena handled water rights, easements, grazing access disputes, cases where property lines turned neighbors into enemies. Her office overlooked the rail yard downtown, and every few minutes the windows rattled from freight trains rolling west through the mountains. She read the HOA fine notice without reacting much. Then she flipped to the cease and desist letter, then to the copy of my deed. Finally, she leaned back in her chair. They never cited a recorded ownership instrument, she said. I noticed. That's because they don't have one. She tapped the orange violation notice with one finger. But they do have something else. Residents. She nodded once. And people who've been conditioned to obey official-looking paper. Lena had dealt with HOAs before. According to her, most of them operated less like governments and more like small private kingdoms. Enough authority to intimidate. Enough legal language to scare people into compliance. Enough money to drag out disputes longer than ordinary homeowners could afford. But this, she said, lifting the deed again. This is different. You're not fighting over a fence line or parking rules. You own the water itself. Apparently nobody told Vanessa. Lena smiled faintly. People who've had unchecked authority too long stop verifying things. They start assuming their power is the law. By noon, I understood two things clearly. First, the HOA had no documented ownership claim over Blackwater Reservoir. Second, Vanessa Holloway was going to escalate anyway. I saw exactly how far she'd gone later that evening. Millstone Ridge sat high in the foothills west of Ashton Creek, where old ranch property slowly gave way to expensive mountain homes with stone gates and timber framing. The HOA entrance looked more like a luxury resort than a subdivision. I drove through just before sunset. Nobody stopped me. Nobody legally could. The Marina sat below the main clubhouse at the edge of the reservoir, wooden docks stretching into dark water beneath rows of hanging lights. Boats rocked gently in their slips. A sign near the gate read, "Private HOA amenity authorized members." Only I parked along the gravel shoulder and walked toward the clubhouse. The meeting was already underway. Through the windows I could see nearly 50 residents seated in folding chairs, while Vanessa stood at the front of the room holding papers in one hand like a prosecutor addressing a jury. Even through the glass, her voice carried. This individual purchased a disputed parcel through a county loophole, she announced. And now he's attempting to seize community property that belongs to all of us. Murmurs spread through the room. She had dressed carefully for the performance. Navy blazer, pearl necklace. Calm authority, the kind of person who made rules sound moral simply by saying them confidently enough. A man near the back raised his hand. Older, gray beard. Did the county confirm the HOA owns the lake? He asked. Vanessa answered too quickly. Our attorneys are handling that, not yes, not no, just confidence. Another resident asked whether the marina could actually be shut down. Vanessa smiled tightly. Absolutely not. That got applause. I stayed outside listening. Then a quieter voice spoke from near the side wall. What if the deed's real? The room shifted slightly. Vanessa's expression hardened immediately. The association has maintained Blackwater Reservoir continuously for 23 years, she said. We've invested in the docks, landscaping, maintenance, insurance. That's not ownership, the older man interrupted. Silence hit the room. Vanessa looked toward him carefully now. The man stood slowly from his chair, tall, lean, worn denim jacket, weathered face. I recognized him immediately from old Wildlife Commission photos hanging in the county offices. Clay Bennett, retired game warden. Clay, Vanessa said, voice tightening. The board has already consulted legal counsel. And did legal counsel explain how y'all built a marina on water nobody bothered to deed to the HOA? A few heads turned. Somebody whispered something near the front row. Vanessa stepped away from the podium. Mr. Bennett, she said coldly, if you're here to undermine the board, I'm here because people deserve facts before you ask them for money. There it was. Money. Vanessa grabbed onto the room again immediately. The board is considering a special legal assessment to defend community assets against outside acquisition attempts. Now the room reacted harder. Residents exchanged glances. One woman muttered, "How much?" Vanessa didn't hesitate. $400 per household. The silence afterward felt heavier than anything Clay Bennett had said. 96 homes, nearly $40,000, to fight the legal owner of the reservoir. Clay looked around the room slowly before speaking again. Funny thing about land, he said. Doesn't care who's been pretending to own it. Vanessa's face reddened. This meeting is for residents only, she snapped. Clay nodded toward the window. Toward me. That was when Vanessa finally realized I'd been standing outside the entire time. Our eyes locked through the clubhouse glass. For just a second, nobody in the room moved. Then Vanessa marched toward the front doors. I turned before she reached them and walked calmly back toward my truck. Behind me, I heard the clubhouse doors slam open. Mr. Mercer, I kept walking. This community will not be extorted by some opportunist with a paperwork trick. I stopped beside the driver's door and looked back at her across the gravel lot. Then maybe your lawyers should read the paperwork. The Marina lights reflected behind her on the reservoir water. Orange. Sharp. Almost the exact same shade as the violation notice sitting on my kitchen table at home. Vanessa stared at me another second before speaking again. You have no idea what you're interfering with. No, I said quietly. I think I finally do. Then I got in my truck and drove away. In the rearview mirror, I could still see the Marina lights glowing over Blackwater Reservoir, and standing beside them, rigid and furious in the parking lot, was a woman who had spent 11 years ruling Millstone Ridge like a courtroom. But courtrooms only work when the law agrees with the judge. And for the first time since Vanessa Holloway took power inside that neighborhood, the law wasn't standing on her side anymore. The next morning, Lena called before I finished breakfast. They sent another notice, she said. I opened my email while she stayed on the line. The subject line alone told me Vanessa had chosen war. Final demand for compliance. Attached was a 5-page letter from Millstone Ridge's property management company, copied to their HOA attorney. The language had gotten heavier. Unauthorized presence, continued trespass, interference with association amenities, immediate payment required. The fine had grown, $500 per day, until I ceased all activity around Blackwater Reservoir. I stared at the total, $7,000. For standing near water I owned. They're trying to create pressure, Lena said. If you panic, they win. If you ignore it, they may file a lien and cloud title. So we answer once, clearly, then we build. By noon, Lena had drafted the response. It cited my recorded deed, the parcel number, the 1987 plat map, and the absence of any recorded easement granting the HOA rights to the reservoir. She demanded they produce a deed, easement, or legally recorded instrument within 10 business days. I signed it. We sent it certified mail. Then Vanessa escalated in public. That Thursday night, Clay Bennett sent me a text. Emergency meeting. Clubhouse. They're voting on legal assessment. I drove to Millstone Ridge, parked outside the stone entrance, and watched from the road through the lit clubhouse windows. The parking lot was packed. Pickup trucks, luxury SUVs, golf carts lined along the curb. Inside, Vanessa stood at the front with a projector screen behind her. Clay sent me a photo from his seat. There I was on the slide. A blurry picture of me standing beside the reservoir, taken the morning the deputies came. Under it, in bold letters, outside speculator threatening Millstone Ridge Lake access. I felt my jaw tighten. Not because she insulted me, because 60 people in that room were being frightened into paying for her mistake. Clay's next text came a minute later. She's asking for $400 per household. I did the math in my head. 96 homes, $38,400. To fight the man holding the deed. Then Clay sent another message. She says attorneys confirmed adverse possession. Lena was still at her office when I called her. Can they claim that? I asked. They can file it, she said. That doesn't mean they can win. She told them 23 years of use gives them the lake. Lena went quiet for a moment. Ethan, pull up the Army Corps email you got before closing. I opened my laptop in the truck and found the message from the district office. The one I had treated like background information. The one referencing Alder Creek and federal jurisdiction. Lena read it while I waited. When she came back on the line, her voice had changed. That Marina, she said. Does it have boat slips? 4. Floating platform? Yes. Equipment shed at the end of the dock. Any permit placard posted? I didn't look. I drove down the public gravel path along the east side of Blackwater, parked where the shoreline curved near the old cottonwoods, and walked until I could see the marina gate through the dark. The wind carried music from the clubhouse. Applause broke out once, muffled by distance and glass. I focused on the dock. The gate had a members-only sign. The shed had an HOA logo. The platform had string lights and a storage box chained to a post. No placard, no posted permit number, no federal notice, nothing. I took photos from every angle I could legally reach. Gate, dock, boat slips, shed, bare posts where permits should have been displayed. I sent them to Lena. Her reply came in less than 30 seconds. Do not confront anyone. Go home. Then another message followed. If this water is under Corps jurisdiction, and they built that marina without Section 10 and 404 permits, their entire adverse possession argument may become evidence of unlawful encroachment. I stood there in the dark with the reservoir moving quietly below me, and the 8-way clubhouse glowing across the hill like a courtroom, where the wrong verdict had already been read. Inside, Vanessa was raising money to prove the HOA owned the lake. Outside, I was photographing the one thing that could shut down their marina completely. The dock wasn't just sitting on my water. It might have been illegal the entire time. That thought stayed with me all night. By morning, Lena had already filed a preliminary records request with the HOA's management company. Financial statements, meeting minutes, marina maintenance contracts, amenity fee schedules, anything connected to Blackwater Reservoir. They'll stall, she told me. But if they're using the lake as the basis for assessments, they've created a paper trail. Vanessa had spent years turning paper into a weapon. Now we were going to read it. The first person to come forward was Clay Bennett. He didn't call. He showed up at my cabin 2 evenings later in an old green pickup with wildlife department stickers still ghosted on the back window. He carried a cardboard file box under one arm and didn't bother with small talk. You need to see what she's done to people, he said. We sat at my kitchen table while the light went out behind the pines. Inside that box were copies of HOA violation notices going back years. Mailbox trim 1/2 inch too tall. Unauthorized gravel color. A utility trailer visible from the road for 46 minutes past the allowed window. Each notice had the same tone. Polite, final, threatening. She fined my neighbor $200 for leaving a ladder beside his garage after a hailstorm, Clay said. His roof was leaking into the nursery. I opened another folder. Lien warning. Foreclosure reference. Payment deadline. All for violations that looked less like rules and more like traps. She scares them, Clay said. That's the whole system. Most folks pay because they can't afford to find out whether she's bluffing. Then he slid one envelope across the table, separate from the rest. This one's why I'm here. The name on it was Marjorie Ellis. I met her the next morning at a diner outside Ashton Creek, far enough from Millstone Ridge that no one would casually notice. She was in her late 60s, small, careful, wearing a black cardigan despite the heat. Her husband had died the previous spring. His old Ford pickup had stayed in the driveway while she handled the funeral, bank accounts, death certificates, all the ugly paperwork grief leaves behind. On day 9, the HOA sent her a violation letter. Unapproved vehicle storage. Fine. $950. Payment required within 15 days to avoid lien processing. She slid a copy of the notice toward me, with hands that were steady, because she had already cried over it months ago. I paid it the same week I buried him, she said. I didn't speak right away. There are moments where anger moves past heat and becomes something cold enough to use. Would you be willing to sign a statement? I asked. She nodded. I already wrote one. She pulled 2 type pages from her purse. Dated, signed, precise. No drama, just truth. That document hit harder than any speech could have. By the end of the week, 3 more residents contacted me through Clay. One had paid fines for holiday lights, left up after a snowstorm blocked his ladder. Another had been threatened with a lien over weeds growing along a drainage ditch the HOA itself maintained. A third showed me something Lena had been waiting for. Annual dues statements. Lake amenity access fee. $85 per household, every year. 96 homes. I sent the statements to Lena. She called back within 20 minutes. Ethan, she said, do you know how long this fee appears in the records? How long? At least 11 years in the packet they produced. I did the math while she was still talking. $85 times 96 households, $8,160 a year. 11 years, just under $90,000. For access to a lake they didn't own, I said. For access to a lake they didn't own, Lena confirmed. That changed the entire weight of the case. Before Vanessa could pretend this was a dispute over boundaries, a misunderstanding, a community defending tradition. Now there was money, collected annually, labeled clearly, spent under authority the HOA could not prove it had. Lena's voice sharpened. Don't contact Vanessa. Don't contact the board. Don't warn them. We need complete records first. But Vanessa warned herself. That Friday afternoon, a letter arrived from Millstone Ridge's attorney. Thick envelope. Expensive paper. The kind that tries to intimidate before you even read it. The HOA denied all ownership challenges, demanded that I cease communications with residents, accused me of interfering with association governance, and repeated the fine balance. Now $10,500. At the bottom, one sentence stood out. Millstone Ridge Estates reserves all rights to pursue legal action to quiet title to Blackwater Reservoir, based on continuous open and notorious use for a period exceeding 23 years. I read it twice, quiet title. Adverse possession, they were really going to try it. I emailed the letter to Lena. Her reply came almost immediately. Good. Now they have to put their theory in front of a judge. I looked at Clay's box on my table. Marjorie's signed statement. The lake fee records, the photos of the dock, the missing permit placards, the deed. Vanessa Holloway thought she was building a wall around her power. She didn't realize every piece of paper she sent me became another stone in the case against her. The lawsuit arrived on a Monday morning. A county process server drove up my dirt road just after sunrise and handed me a thick envelope stamped District Court of Mesa County. Millstone Ridge Estates Homeowners Association versus Ethan Mercer. Petition to quiet title. They were officially trying to take the reservoir. I stood beside my truck, reading the filing, while dust drifted across the ranch fence line. Vanessa's attorneys argued that the HOA had maintained, controlled, and openly used Blackwater Reservoir for 23 uninterrupted years. According to them, the Marina, fishing access, HOA dues, maintenance records, and community events established ownership through adverse possession. It was polished, confident, and dangerous enough that an unprepared judge might take it seriously. I called Lena immediately. Don't panic, she said before I even finished summarizing it. This was always coming. They're treating 23 years like a deed. That's because they think state property law is the whole fight. Her tone shifted slightly. It isn't. 2 days later, we sat inside courtroom B on the third floor of the county courthouse. Vanessa had arrived early with 3 HOA board members and their attorney, Gerald Pike, a silver-haired real estate litigator with the calm expression of a man who billed by the hour and rarely lost sleep. Vanessa looked straight ahead when I entered, didn't nod, didn't blink, but she'd dressed for victory. Navy suit again, pearl necklace again. The same performance from the clubhouse meeting, only now the audience included a judge. Residents filled half the gallery behind her. Clay Bennett sat in the back row, wearing the same denim jacket. Marjorie Ellis sat 2 seats away from him, holding folded papers in her lap. The hearing started exactly at 9. Pike stood first. For 40 minutes, he laid out the HOA's case piece by piece. Marina maintenance invoices, landscaping contracts, photos of summer events on the dock stretching back almost 2 decades. Financial statements showing community expenditures tied directly to the reservoir. Then came the line he clearly believed would end the matter. The association has exercised continuous, open, and notorious possession over Blackwater Reservoir for 23 years without interruption or challenge. Vanessa nodded slowly beside him. Pike glanced toward me briefly before continuing. The plaintiff, therefore, requests recognition of lawful ownership through adverse possession and seeks immediate removal of the defendant from association property. The judge made several notes. Older man, careful eyes, the kind who listened longer than he spoke. Then Lena stood. She carried only a thin folder compared to Pike's stack of exhibits. That difference made Vanessa smile for exactly 3 seconds. Lena placed 3 documents on the evidence table. My deed, the original 1987 plat map, and the Army Corps jurisdiction letter. The smile disappeared. Your Honor, Lena said calmly, the plaintiff's argument fails for one critical reason. Blackwater Reservoir is connected to Alder Creek, which places the water body under federal navigable water jurisdiction. Pike interrupted immediately. The core issue is unrelated to title ownership. No, Lena said evenly. It is central to it. The courtroom quieted. She lifted the Army Corps letter slightly. The HOA's own filings establish continuous marina operation, dock expansion, and recreational control over federally regulated water without document Section 10 or Section 404 permitting. Now even the judge stopped writing. Pike's expression changed for the first time. Just slightly, Lena continued. The plaintiff is attempting to claim legal ownership through decades of use that federal law may classify as unauthorized encroachment. Silence. Real silence. The judge extended one hand toward the letter. Lena handed it over. He read carefully while nobody in the room moved. Vanessa leaned toward Pike and whispered something urgently. Pike whispered back without taking his eyes off the judge. Finally, the judge looked up. Counselor, he said to Pike, was the marina permitted through the Army Corps of Engineers? Pike hesitated. The hesitation lasted maybe 2 seconds. Long enough. We are currently reviewing federal compliance documentation, he answered. That was lawyer language for no. I watched Vanessa's posture stiffen beside him. The judge looked back at Lena. You're asserting federal jurisdiction preempts the adverse possession claim. I'm asserting, Lena said, that the HOA cannot establish lawful ownership through prolonged use of a federally regulated water body while simultaneously failing to demonstrate lawful authorization for the structures supporting that use. The judge leaned back slowly. Then he looked again at the Army Corps letter. 1-paged, 2 pages, twice. The entire courtroom waited. Finally he spoke. I'm postponing further proceedings pending clarification of federal jurisdiction and regulatory status. Vanessa's head snapped toward Pike. Pike stayed composed, but only barely. The judge continued. Counsel will submit supplemental filings within 21 days. This court will not issue ownership findings while unresolved federal compliance issues remain active. The gavel struck once, not loudly, didn't need to, because the room already understood what had happened. Vanessa came into court expecting a simple property fight. Instead, federal law had entered the room and sat down at the table. As people filed into the hallway afterward, residents whispered quietly among themselves. Clay caught my eye from across the corridor and gave one small nod. Marjorie Ellis looked relieved for the first time since I'd met her. Vanessa walked out beside Pike without looking at anyone. But halfway down the courthouse steps, she finally turned toward him sharply enough that even from 30 feet away I could tell the conversation wasn't going well. I couldn't hear the words. I didn't need to, because Lena was already standing beside me watching the same thing. They built that marina without permits, she said quietly. You sure? No. She looked toward Vanessa again. But I think their attorney just realized it too. That afternoon, Lena filed a formal request for federal inspection review with the Army Corps District Office. And somewhere inside Millstone Ridge, behind all the marina lights and HOA notices and 23 years of assumed authority, panic had finally started to spread. It showed up first in the residence. Clay Bennett called me 2 nights after the hearing. People are asking questions now, he said. Real questions. About what, where the permits are. I leaned back in my chair. Outside my cabin window, the ridgeline had already gone dark. Vanessa, answer them. She keeps saying the attorneys are handling everything. That usually means no. Clay laughed once, short, tired. She held another board meeting tonight. Bigger crowd this time. Folks are nervous about the federal part. Good. No, he said quietly. Scared people do stupid things. The next morning proved him right. Someone had nailed a handwritten sign to the old split-rail fence near the eastern shoreline path. Keep out private HOA property. Underneath it, someone had spray-painted, Land Shark Go Home. I parked beside the fence and stared at it for a long moment. The wood was fresh. The paint still smelled chemical in the cold air. Whoever put it there had done it after midnight. I took photographs from multiple angles, time-stamped them, and emailed the images directly to Lena. Then I removed the sign carefully and placed it in the truck bed. An hour later, Deputy Cole Ramirez pulled into the turnout beside me. You reporting vandalism? He asked, documenting it. He looked at the fence post, then at the sign in my truck. You want to file charges? Not unless somebody gives me a name. Ramirez nodded slowly. The last few weeks had changed his posture around me. Less suspicion now, more caution. You've got people stirred up in there, he said, glancing toward Millstone Ridge above the trees. No, I answered. The truth stirred them up. He didn't argue. Before leaving, he hesitated near his cruiser. For what it's worth, he said quietly. County Dispatch got 3 calls yesterday, asking whether federal agents were really coming. I looked toward the reservoir. They are. The Army Corps trucks arrived the following Wednesday at 7:12 in the morning. White government pickups. Green markings on the doors. 2 inspectors. No sirens. No drama. Which somehow made it feel heavier. I was parked along the public gravel path, overlooking Blackwater, when they rolled through the marina entrance gate. Residents immediately started appearing on porches and driveways above the shoreline. Golf carts, phones, coffee mugs held halfway to faces. The inspectors stepped out carrying clipboards, measuring tools, and a tablet computer. One of them, a tall man with gray hair and mirrored sunglasses, introduced himself to the dock manager and immediately asked the question Lena predicted. Can you provide the Section 10 and 404 permits for this structure? The dock manager froze. Even from 50 yards away, I could see it happen. That slight pause people make when they realize the script they prepared no longer works. I'll have to call the board, he said. The inspector nodded once. Please do. Then they started measuring everything. Dock width, slip length, floating platform dimensions, support pilings, equipment shed. They photographed the marina from every angle while residents gathered farther uphill, whispering among themselves. At 7:41, Vanessa Holloway arrived, black SUV. Fast. She climbed out already talking before the driver's door shut. "I'm president of the association," she announced while walking directly toward the inspectors. There's clearly been some misunderstanding. The older inspector looked up from his clipboard. "Do you have the permit documentation, Mom?" "Our attorneys are reviewing." "Do you have the permits?" Silence. Vanessa glanced toward the dock manager, then toward the residents watching, then toward me. She spotted my truck immediately above the shoreline path, and her expression hardened, like she'd finally found someone she could still blame. "This inspection was requested maliciously," she snapped, "by a private individual attempting to extort the association." The inspector didn't react at all. "Federal jurisdiction complaints are reviewed according to statute," he said calmly. "Ownership disputes are irrelevant to compliance requirements." That landed harder than anything else he could have said, because suddenly the fight wasn't about Vanessa anymore, or me, or even the HOA. Federal law had entered the reservoir, and federal law did not care about HOA politics. The inspectors spent 43 minutes at the marina. I know because I checked the timestamps later. Before leaving, the older inspector handed the dock manager a formal notice packet. "Failure to provide permit documentation may result in enforcement action," he said. Vanessa tried once more. "This marina has operated for over 20 years. The inspector slid his sunglasses back into place. "That doesn't answer the question." Then the trucks drove out through the marina gate and disappeared up the road toward town. Nobody moved for several seconds afterward. The residents remained standing in clusters above the shoreline. The dock manager looked sick. Vanessa stood near the gate, gripping the inspection packet tightly enough to bend the edges. And across the water, the marina itself looked suddenly different. Not permanent anymore, not protected, just exposed. That evening, the string lights still glowed above the dock. Boats still rocked gently in their slips. But the atmosphere around Blackwater Reservoir had changed completely, because everyone inside Millstone Ridge now understood the same thing. The HOA might lose the lawsuit, but the federal government could shut down the marina long before that happened. Vanessa Holloway responded the only way people like her ever respond when control starts slipping. She performed confidence louder. 3 days after the federal inspection, glossy flyers appeared throughout Millstone Ridge. Summer marina celebration protecting our lake together food trucks, live music, boat parade at sunset, residents only. Clay Bennett sent me a photo of the flyer with one sentence underneath. "She's trying to prove nothing's wrong." The event was scheduled for Saturday evening. The same Saturday, Lena received a follow-up notice from the Army Corps District Office requesting additional documentation regarding potential unauthorized marina structures. That wording mattered. Potential unauthorized structures, not disputed structures, not privately owned structures, unauthorized. Lena called me immediately. "They're moving faster than I expected." "How fast?" "If the HOA can't produce permits, enforcement action could come before the next hearing." I looked toward Blackwater through my kitchen window. Does Vanessa know that? She knows enough to be nervous. But nervous wasn't stopping her. Saturday evening, Millstone Ridge lit up like a campaign rally. I drove past just before sunset on the county road above the reservoir. Music drifted through the trees. The marina glowed orange and white under the string lights while boats circled slowly across the water. Residents packed the shoreline. Kids ran between folding chairs. Someone had hung a giant banner near the dock entrance. "Our lake, our community." Vanessa stood near the marina gate holding a microphone. Even from the road, I could hear the applause after her speech. I didn't stop driving. That mattered more than showing up angry ever could, because Vanessa wanted a confrontation. Instead, I gave her silence, and silence makes arrogant people overplay their hand. Sunday morning, Clay called before 8. She used your name 3 times during the speech. What'd she say? That outside opportunists were trying to weaponize technicalities against hardworking residents. I almost laughed. Technicalities. That was how people described deeds when deeds became inconvenient. Then Clay's tone changed. Couple folks are starting to turn on her. How many? Enough. Monday morning at 9:14, the Army Corps field officer arrived at Millstone Ridge. Not with deputies, not with sirens, just a federal truck and a sealed enforcement packet. I wasn't there when it happened. Clay was. He called me while I was fueling my truck outside Ashton Creek. They chained the gate, he said immediately. I straightened. What? Federal lock, heavy steel one. They posted an orange cease and desist notice right on the Marina entrance. I was already climbing back into the truck before he finished talking. The drive took 17 minutes. By the time I reached Blackwater Reservoir, half the neighborhood was standing near the clubhouse, watching the marina from uphill, like people staring at a fire they didn't know how to put out. The federal truck was gone. The lock remained. A thick steel chain wrapped through the marina gate with a bright orange notice zip-tied beside it. Federal cease and desist order unauthorized structure. Operation prohibited, no marina use permitted, pending compliance review. No boat access, no dock activity, no occupancy. The same dock Vanessa celebrated on Saturday night sat completely silent Monday morning. Boats rocked uselessly inside their slips. The string lights still hung overhead from the party. Nobody touched them. Vanessa stood near the shoreline arguing with Gerald Pike, while several residents watched from a distance. Pike looked exhausted already. She looked furious. Then she saw me. The conversation stopped instantly. Vanessa walked toward me across the gravel path fast enough that Pike tried unsuccessfully to catch her arm. "You did this," she snapped. I looked at the federal notice. "No," I said calmly. "Federal law did." Her face flushed hard. "You think you've won something here?" "I think someone should check the permits before building a marina on water they didn't own. That reservoir belongs to this community." I nodded toward the chain on the gate. Apparently the Army Corps disagrees. For a second I thought she might actually lose control completely right there in front of everyone. Instead she lowered her voice, cold now, controlled. "You have any idea what you're costing these residents?" That question landed differently than she intended. Because, for the first time, people nearby were listening to her without fear. An older man standing near the clubhouse finally spoke up. "How much did the lawsuit cost us already?" Vanessa turned sharply. "This is not the time." "No," another resident interrupted quietly. "Seems like exactly the time." The atmosphere shifted. Not dramatically, just enough. Enough that Vanessa felt it too. You could see it in the way she looked around afterward. The room she used to control so easily wasn't responding the same way anymore. Pike stepped beside her quickly. "We should discuss this privately," he muttered. She stared at me another second before turning away toward the clubhouse. The residents parted for her silently. No applause now. No microphones. No marina celebration. Just an orange federal notice hanging beside the HOA's members' only sign. Same color as the violation notice. Vanessa handed me the morning she called 911. Only this one actually carried authority. Clay walked over beside me once Vanessa disappeared inside. "She still thinks she could win the hearing," he said, quietly. "When is it?" 3 days. I looked again at the chained gate. 3 days. 3 days until a judge reviewed a federal shutdown order attached to a marina sitting illegally on water owned by the man the HOA had tried to fine for trespassing. And, somewhere inside the clubhouse above the shoreline, Vanessa Holloway was finally running out of ways to pretend she controlled Blackwater Reservoir. The hearing started at 8:30 Thursday morning. By 8:10, the courthouse hallway was already crowded with Millstone Ridge residents whispering in clusters beneath fluorescent lights. Some carried folders. Some carried printed copies of the federal cease and desist order pulled from the public record website overnight. Nobody looked relaxed anymore. Vanessa arrived with Gerald Pike 5 minutes before the courtroom opened. She wore gray this time instead of navy. No pearls, no performance smile. Just tension. The federal shutdown had changed something deeper than strategy. It had broken certainty. Pike walked beside her, carrying 2 thick binders and the exhausted expression of a man trying to salvage a case, collapsing faster than his client understood. Clay Bennett nodded at me from the far wall. Marjorie Ellis sat quietly near the courtroom doors, beside 2 residents I recognized from the Marina gathering. Word had spread through Millstone Ridge fast after the federal lock went up, not just about the Marina, about the fees, the lawsuit, the missing permits. The questions nobody had asked for 23 years. When the courtroom doors opened, people filed in silently. The federal cease and desist order sat on the judge's bench before anyone even spoke. That mattered. The judge had already read it. Pike stood first again, but the confidence from the first hearing was gone now. He argued that the federal enforcement issue was administrative, separate from ownership rights, separate from the HOA's long-term use claim. He insisted the Marina shutdown did not invalidate the association's adverse possession argument. The judge listened carefully, then asked one question. Did the HOA possess valid Army Corps permits at any point during those 23 years? Pike paused, long enough for every resident in the room to feel it. We have not located finalized documentation yet, he answered carefully. Another lawyer sentence, another no. The judge made a note. Then Lena stood. She didn't raise her voice once. She simply walked the court through the timeline. The 1987 plat separating the reservoir from HOA property. The absence of any recorded easement. The HOA's own financial records proving they charged residents annual lake access fees for property they never owned. Then finally the federal issue. The plaintiff's claim depends entirely upon prolonged operational control of Blackwater Reservoir, she said calmly. But the federal government has now determined that the marina structures supporting that control were operating without required authorization. She placed the cease and desist order beside the plat map. The COA cannot establish lawful ownership through unlawful use. Silence settled over the courtroom. Even Pike stopped writing, Lena continued. The federal government has already determined these marina operations lacked compliance. The plaintiff's own evidence now establishes 23 years of unauthorized encroachment on federally regulated water. The judge picked up the federal order. Read it once, then again slower. That second reading changed the room, because everyone understood the same thing simultaneously. The federal government wasn't threatening enforcement anymore. Enforcement had already happened. The marina was already shut down. The judge lowered the document carefully onto the bench. Then he looked directly at Pike. "Counselor," he said evenly, "this court is not prepared to award ownership rights based upon activity currently deemed non-compliant under federal jurisdiction." Vanessa's shoulders stiffened beside him. Pike attempted one final argument. "Your Honor, residents have relied upon access to this reservoir for decades. Reliance is not ownership," the judge interrupted quietly. That line hit harder than the gavel would have. Several residents exchanged glances immediately behind Vanessa. The judge continued. "The court declines to recognize the plaintiff's adverse possession claim under these circumstances." Then came the words that ended the fight. Petition dismissed. Nobody moved, not immediately, because after months of threats, meetings, fines, legal letters, federal inspections, and public accusations, the actual collapse happened in almost complete silence. Vanessa stared forward without blinking. Pike closed his binder slowly. Clay Bennett leaned back in his chair and exhaled once through his nose, like a man setting down weight he'd carried too long. Behind him, one resident whispered quietly to another. They charged us for a lake they didn't even own. The judge wasn't finished. The defendant's recorded deed remains valid and uncontested. Court costs assigned to the plaintiff. That finally broke the room loose. Conversations erupted instantly across the gallery. Residents stood talking over one another. Questions spread faster than answers now. How much did the HO spend? What happens to the marina? What about the assessments? Vanessa rose sharply from her seat and walked toward the exit without speaking to anyone. But halfway to the doors, a man near the aisle stopped her. One of the residents from the Marina celebration. "Did you know?" he asked. She froze. He held up a copy of the federal order. "Did you know there weren't permits?" The entire hallway outside had gone quiet enough to hear his voice through the open doors. Vanessa looked at him, then at the paper, then at the crowd gathering beyond the courtroom entrance. "I did what I believed was necessary to protect this community," she said tightly. "That's not what I asked." For the first time since I met her, Vanessa Holloway didn't have an immediate answer. She turned and walked out of the courthouse without another word. The residents watched her leave in silence. Not fear anymore, not loyalty either, just realization. Outside, the marina gate at Blackwater Reservoir still sat chained shut under a bright orange federal notice. And now everyone in Millstone Ridge finally understood why. The first board meeting after the ruling lasted 11 minutes before Vanessa Holloway lost control of the room. Clay told me about it that night. Residents came with folders, not opinions. Folders, printed court order, federal cease and desist notice, HOA financial summaries, the lake amenity fee line circled in red. Vanessa opened with a statement about legal disappointment and continued commitment to community assets. A man in the second row stood before she finished. "How much of our money did you spend fighting a case you didn't verify?" Another resident stood. "Why were we charged lake access fees for water the HOA never owned?" Then Marjorie Ellis spoke. Clay said the room went quiet when she rose. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't accuse anyone dramatically. She simply told them about the $950 fine she paid during the week she buried her husband. When she finished, nobody clapped. Nobody needed to. Vanessa tried to adjourn the meeting. The board refused. 3 days later, she resigned as HOA president. No speech, no apology. Just a brief email from the management company stating she was stepping down effective immediately. For 11 years, she had ruled Millstone Ridge through notices, fines, and fear. In the end, she left through a paragraph. The new interim president was Darren Pike, one of the quieter board members who had barely spoken during the lawsuit. He called Lena first, not me. That told me he was serious. Within 2 weeks, we met at a title company conference room in Ashton Creek. Darren sat across from us with the HOA's new attorney, a younger woman who had clearly read every document before walking in. No speeches, no threats, just terms. Millstone Ridge would receive a recorded recreational easement for Blackwater Reservoir. Fishing, non-motorized boating, seasonal events, and marina use would continue, but only after Army Corps compliance. The HOA would maintain the dock, carry insurance, post required safety equipment, and pay an annual easement fee, $60 per household. Less than the $85 they had been charging people for years without legal authority. All fines against me were withdrawn. Every dollar, every notice, every claim that I had trespassed on my own property disappeared in one clean line of the agreement. I signed first. Darren signed after me. His handshake was stiff, but honest. "I'm sorry it got this far," he said. I believed him. The Army Corps permit process took longer. Federal paperwork never moves like water. The marina stayed locked through most of the fall, while engineers inspected the pilings, added depth markers, installed life rings, upgraded platform lighting, and documented everything the HOA should have documented years earlier. Residents were angry at first. Then they saw the invoices, not legal threats, actual repairs, actual compliance, actual records. The board sent a letter to all 96 homeowners, admitting the prior lake access fee had been collected without proper ownership documentation. They didn't call it fraud. They called it incomplete legal basis. That was board language. Still, they created a credit toward future dues for the special assessment money spent on the failed lawsuit. $38,400, gone in weeks, returned slowly through accountability. It wasn't perfect justice. Real life rarely is. But it was something Vanessa's version of Millstone Ridge had never offered. An admission. Clay Bennett won a board seat in November. So did Marjorie Ellis. The first new rule they passed was simple. No lien threats without attorney review and board approval on the record. The second was even simpler. No resident could be fined without a written citation to the exact governing document and a clear appeal process. Vanessa's kingdom didn't collapse in flames. It collapsed into minutes, audits, ballots, and recorded votes. Which was better? Because those things last. The federal lock came off the Marina gate the Friday after Thanksgiving. I didn't go watch. That would felt like gloating. And I'd had enough of performance. But later that afternoon, I drove down the old gravel path and parked near the shoreline, where the deputies had first found me with cold coffee in my hand. The gate was open. The orange federal notice was gone. The HOA members-only sign had been replaced with a smaller one. Blackwater Reservoir access authorized. Under recorded easement, please. Respect private water rights. The string lights still hung from the Marina roof line, sagging a little in the cold wind. Someone would fix them before summer. The boats were gone for the season, and the dock sat empty against pewter-colored water. No crowd, no shouting, no deputies. No Vanessa Holloway pointing I was a criminal. Just the lake, still, unbothered. I stood there long enough for my coffee to cool in the cup holder behind me, then laughed once under my breath. Full circle. Only this time, the coffee wasn't bitter. I thought about the first orange notice Vanessa handed me. Trespass on community amenity. Official-looking paper with no authority behind it. Then I thought about the federal orange notice that shut down the Marina. Plain paper with real law behind it. Same shoreline, same color, different weight. I didn't take the lake from anyone. I bought what the county sold, asked for a meeting, got ignored, got threatened, then let the records speak louder than Vanessa ever could. That's the thing about land and water and truth. They don't care how long somebody has been lying about them. They only care what can be proved. I got back in my truck and drove home through the foothills as the last light faded behind the pines. Behind me, Blackwater Reservoir stayed exactly where it had always been. The water didn't change, the power did.
And I think that's a real lesson in on this. Most problems don't start because people ask questions. They start because nobody asked them for a very long time. That Marina stood there for over 2 decades, and folks just assumed the paperwork matched the sign on the gate. But assumptions aren't ownership, and authority only means something when it's backed by honesty, record, and accountability. What stayed with me most wasn't the court hearing or the federal roadblock on the Marina. It was watching ordinary people finally speak up once they realized they didn't have to be afraid forever. A retrial game wonder. A window carry-out violation, nothing imposed. Quiet people who just wanted fairness and a little dignity back in their community. That's what stories like this matter. Not because somebody won, but because the truth eventually had room to breathe. So let me ask you something. Have you ever dealt with an HOA, a property dispute, or somebody in power who counted on people staying quiet? If you have, drop a yes in the comments I always read them, and honestly, some of the best stories on this channel come from folks willing to share what they live through. And if you enjoy this Brownie HOA and like brain story about patience, perseverance, and standing your ground the right way, subscribe, stick around. There are plenty more stories waiting down the road.